There's been another murder. Who killed Miriam Crace? Who killed Lady Chalfont? Who killed Alice Carling? How many characters in this book have fallen under a train? If you like watching someone very confused, you're gonna love this video covering pages 200 to 407. Let's solve Marble Hall murders. Welcome back to our second video on Marble Hall murders, the third book in the Susan Ryeland Atticus Pund series. If you haven't watched our first video, check that one out. It covers the first 200 pages of the book. This second video is going to cover the middle 200 pages of the book, from page 200 to page 400. Now, when I'm recording this, I've only read up to page 300, but later on, I'll give you my thoughts after I've completed page 400. Guys, because this is the third book in the series, like I said in the last video, we may spoil Marble Hall murders and Moonflower murders. And because this series is so much based in a homage to Agatha Christie mysteries, I'm going to try not to spoil any Agatha Christie mystery. But if I do, I may say something like, boy, this twist feels a bit like, I don't know, Death on the Nile. So far, nothing feels like Death on the Nile. But I may talk about those sort of things as well. So I've reached the halfway point, page 300. What do I think? I think I need more suspects up on the big board. And I think that I still don't know enough about Miriam Crace's murder. What do you guys think? Go down in the comments if you have thoughts. If you've read the book, no spoilers, but tell me what you thought, your guesses. I want to hear it. If you haven't started the book, hey, start it. So far, it's pretty good. Let's get to the big board. In that first video, I did accuse somebody of being Miriam Crace's killer. And I have to cover that now that I've read 100 more pages. And after 200 pages, I pointed at this person. Do I agree with that original accusation? Let's talk about it. My initial guess for who killed Miriam Crace, it was Elaine Clover. Why did I pick Elaine Clover? Well, you can watch that first video covering the first 200 pages, but the gist, I couldn't figure out why Elaine Clover is a character in this book. I thought, why is she here? If she doesn't have a reason to be here, she must have a reason like, hey, she's the killer. Well, I've read now to the midpoint, and in these new 100 pages, Elaine Clover doesn't really appear at all. And so you start thinking, uh-oh, did I pick the wrong person? And I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, maybe author Anthony Horowitz, maybe he had a reason for including Elaine Clover in this book that I couldn't figure out. So remember, Susan is working on this Atticus Pund manuscript. Her main reason, she wants a full-time job. She needs a job. But if you're a reader and you're like, Susan's really smart, why would she put up, no job is worth all the grief that the Atticus Pund novels give her. So why would she do it? So maybe Elaine Clover is in this book because author Anthony Horowitz felt like, you know what? We need more of a reason for Susan to stick with this Atticus Pund series. Maybe that's it, right? Maybe that's why she exists in this book. Now that said, I picked her. I picked her after 200 pages. I want my guess to be correct. So I'm going to go into crazy conspiracy land to keep Elaine Clover as our suspect. So how do I keep Elaine Clover a main suspect? Well, what do we know about Miriam Crace's death? There were 3 people there when Miriam Crace died. Her adopted son, Frederick Turner, was there when Miriam Crace died. Dr. Lambert was there when Miriam Crace died, but there was a third person there. It was the housemaid, Mrs. Rodwell. Now, we don't know anything about Mrs. Rodwell, but let's go to crazy conspiracy corner. We know that Charles Clover, he was working with Miriam Crace on her last couple of books. He was going to Marble Hall to work on those books. What if Charles Clover was going to Marble Hall, fell in love with Miss Rodwell, and married her, and Elaine Clover is Elaine Rodwell Clover? Oh boy, really crazy? I have to keep her. That's the only way I can keep her as a main suspect. We'll see when I make my accusation at the end of this video if Elaine Clover is still my main guess. So, pages 200 to 300. What happens in the real world? Well, Susan goes to Marble Hall to find out more about Miriam Crace, about her death. There she meets Frederick Turner, the adopted son. Now, I speculated as soon as I saw that family tree that, Miriam Crace adopted Frederick Turner. What if she's really his mother? And folks, let's really put on our blinkers. Remember, Miriam Crace is Catholic. They may not look too good about having an out-of-wedlock child. Now think about the year 1955. Dateline, 1955. Miriam Crace buys Marble Hall. It's this huge estate out in the middle of nowhere. She didn't have any kids at the time. Why would Miriam Crace buy this giant estate out in the middle of nowhere? Well, she might have bought that giant estate because she's pregnant. She wants to hide and not let people know she's pregnant out at this estate in the middle of nowhere. Let's also think about Miriam Crace knows that she's going to have to give up this child because she's not, it's out of wedlock child. So maybe she buys a giant estate because she thinks I could turn it into an orphanage and that way I could live with this child I'm going to give birth to. And later she does adopt Frederick Turner. So once again, 1955, she buys Marble Hall. 1955 is also the year she had that kind of what's described as an episode, a breakdown, where she went to what is kind of hinted at as an asylum. 1955, going to an asylum, great way to hide, going to a retreat, great way to hide the fact that you're pregnant. What happened in 1955? Frederick Turner was born. Man, this feels like so many ding, ding, dings. Frederick Turner is the child of Miriam Crace that it's so much I'm beginning to think, is it a double bluff? Is it that obvious? Now, one of the first things we learn about Frederick Turner is he's of mixed race. It kind of feels like that's there for one reason and one reason only. If Miriam Crace is Frederick Turner's mother, her husband, Kenneth Rivers, is not his father. So, aka he's out of wedlock child. I should also mention 1955. That's the year the Atticus Pund manuscript, Pund's Last Case, is set, 1955. Focus on 55. What do I know about Frederick? Not much, but what's funny is I don't suspect him in killing Miriam Crace. Yeah, he could be upset. Wait, I'm your child and you gave me up for adoption and kind of treated me poorly? That could be a motive for him to kill Miriam Crace, but I don't think Frederick Turner killed her. What I do think is there is a mystery about Frederick Turner. We meet him, Susan meets him, we as a reader meet him, and we find out, hey, you're injured, you've got this eye patch. Now he claims he was driving, he wasn't paying attention, he ran a red light, he was in a car accident, it was his fault. If this is an Agatha Christie book, guess what? That car accident is not Frederick's fault. He was drugged, he was poisoned. Why would somebody drug and poison Frederick Turner? Well, if they know he's Miriam Crace's first child, her oldest child, and don't want Frederick to get any money in her will, you try to kill him, right? You drug him. Maybe also Frederick Turner was there when Miriam Crace died. Maybe, just maybe, he's noticed something when she died and you want to take him out. Now, what would have drugged Frederick Turner? We learned that Eliot Crace stole some drugs from Dr. Lambert, this cough medicine. Is it possible this cough medicine was given to Frederick Turner, made him drowsy, he's driving, he gets in an accident, and now he wears an eye patch for the rest of his life? I'm just speculating here, people. Now, I've focused so much on the adoption, Miriam Crace adopting Frederick Turner. I didn't mention this when covering the first 200 pages just because there's so many facts. But remember, Miriam Crace's books are about these fictional things called the Little People. The Little People adopted 2 children in those stories. We know Miriam Crace adopted Frederick Turner. Did she adopt a second child? Possibly Jonathan Crace or Eliot Crace's father. We had Jonathan Crace on the big board, but this section of the book is the first time we as readers meet him on the page. He says a bunch of interesting stuff. Let's run through it. Somehow, Jonathan knows Eliot's book is about the Crace family in Marble Hall. How does Jonathan know that? Isn't Susan the first person to read this book? There's also another intriguing line from Jonathan. Jonathan goes to Susan, do you even know why Eliot was hired to write the Atticus Pund continuation novel? Susan says to him, well, it's because he's a good writer. Why else? And Jonathan sneers at her and says, you don't really know anything, do you? Guys, I have no idea why Eliot Crace was hired to write this book, but we'll find out, won't we? Jonathan, he influenced his mom. He told his mom, hey, bring in other people into the Little People book series. He says he is the reason why two new characters, Najingma and Kareem, were introduced into the book series. The adopted two children from the Littles. What does Jonathan know about adoption? Finally, Jonathan had a daughter. She was named after a character in the Little People. She died, she kind of fell under a train is how it said. That happened in 2006. That's about 3 years after Miriam Crace was killed. She died when she was 21. That means she was 18 when Miriam, her grandmother, died. A new character we've not met on the page before, Eliot's older brother, Roland Crace. Roland is 37. That means if his grandma died about 20 years ago, that means he was 17 when Grandma Crace died. Eliot, in the first 200 pages, really made some terrible statements about his grandmother, saying she was the worst. Roland Crace says their grandmother was racist. Racist? Maybe, but if she had a mixed-race child, was Miriam Crace really racist? Roland also gives us probably the motive for Miriam Crace's murder. Miriam wanted to sell the rights to the Little People. This is a book series that makes millions. She wants to sell the rights and just get cash. Somebody probably killed her so that the rights to the Little People would stay in the family. That's my guess. What do you think? Finally, Eliot Crace shows up. He is a mess. He's either drunk or on drugs or both. Eliot wants to retitle his manuscript from Pünd's Last Case to The Man with White Hair. Really odd. He's taking Susan's advice, but also he's asking her real personal questions. Eliot, not cool. I suppose I should put Miriam Crace's husband, Kenneth Rivers, on the board. He was really old when she died. Kenneth was into taxidermy, and he was around a lot of chemicals. We find out that near the end of his life, Dr. Lambert had to put Kenneth on a drug. Dimercaprol is if you've been poisoned with metal, like arsenic or copper or gold. They give you this drug, and that's the drug Dr. Lambert gave to Kenneth Rivers. Dr. Lambert is rich. Did somebody pay him to look the other way at Miriam Crace's death, or to get rid of Kenneth Rivers? Or to not look into Janice Crace's death? Or to not look into Frederick Turner's accident? A whole lot of stuff. What do you think? Go down in the comments. Let me know. We need your help, detectives. Okay, let's dive into the Atticus Pund manuscript, Pünd's Last Case, or The Man with White Hair. Which title do you like best? Go down in the comments, let me know. Now, if you watch that first video, watch it, you'll understand why my suspect in Lady Chalfont's death is Frederick Voltaire, the cop assisting Pünd. Frederick Voltaire, he is my guess. Now, we find out in these 100 pages that Frederick Voltaire, the cop, he's based on Frederick Turner. I don't think Frederick Turner murdered his adopted mother, Miriam Crace, but I do think Frederick Voltaire, so far, murdered Lady Chalfont. Now, in these 100 pages, even though he's still my main suspect, boy, there's a lot of odd things that pop up. Number one, we're focusing a lot of time on these pills that were bought at the pharmacy. And I'm beginning to think this is also a bluff, that these pills have nothing to do with it. But if they did, and Frederick Voltaire bought those pills, why would he return to the pharmacy where he bought them, the scene of the crime, with Atticus Pund? Doesn't make too much sense. Voltaire, we find out he claims he has a wife and son. On page 270, Pund tells Voltaire, hey, you don't like the Germans, and yeah, I was in Germany during World War II, but my heritage is Greek. Those of you guys watch our Atticus Pund is Andreas Patakis theory. That's the big thing that hopefully we'll find out at the end of this novel. Now, there's a whole section of this pharmacy. I don't want to go too deep into it. But on page 154, we focus on a matchbook that Voltaire has. He took out a cigarette in a matchbook. Fraser is looking at it. James Fraser is looking at this. The matchbook says Hotel Lafayette, and Fraser wonders, oh, is that where Voltaire is staying? Then, about 120 pages later, Pund says, oh, that hotel's near the pharmacy. Pund asks Voltaire, hey, where'd you get that matchbook? Voltaire's like, I maybe picked it up at Chateau Belmar, Lady Chalfont's estate, and he thinks he picks it up during the reading of the will. Very suspicious. Did he pick it up there, or did he always have it? Sticking on suspect Voltaire, on page 282, they're going to the Waysmith, Elmer, and Roberts gallery. And there's this odd phrase. It says, Voltaire, who had been to Nice many times, was unaware of the gallery's existence. It's pointing out that Voltaire had been to Nice many times. Why would he go to Nice? He's a Paris detective, isn't he? Why did he go in this case? Suddenly, in the novel Pund's Last Case, we have a new character who has to go on the big board, Alice Carling. And guess what? She's disappeared. Now, we met Alice Carling back on page 137, but I didn't talk about Alice at all in my coverage of the first 200 pages, even though at the time she's described in a way that can only be, that made me think, remember those teenage movies where the girl is kind of awkward and has awkward hair and dresses awkward and she has these big glasses, and then you suddenly take the glasses off and suddenly she's beautiful? Well, listen to this description of Alice Carling from page 137. She was plain-looking young woman with dark hair tightly at the back of her head, pale skin and heavy glasses that did not suit her face. She was wearing a business-like dress and thick leather shoes. It seemed to Pund that she was a prisoner of her own wardrobe and perhaps her own job too. She was still in her 20s. Alice is Catholic. Is Alice having an out-of-wedlock child? Now, it could be with Elmer Waysmith, Robert Waysmith, Geoffrey Chalfont, Harry Littleton. Hell, it could be with Frederick Voltaire. But boy, their interaction back in the page 137, it didn't seem like these two were together to me. Now, the book is setting up that Alice was the woman in the pharmacy. But if Voltaire was the guy in the pharmacy, again, they don't seem like they have a connection that I can see. We find out that she says she was going to marry somebody, but that's what lawyer Lambert says. Nobody else knew that Alice was going to marry somebody. Did she just say that so she could hide a pregnancy? If she was pregnant, again, who would the father be? Well, the most likely person is Robert Waysmith, but maybe, once again, Harry Littleton, maybe Geoffrey Chalfont. Why do you think Alice disappeared and most likely was killed? Do you think she's the woman in the pharmacy? Why was she the woman in the pharmacy? Okay, we're at the halfway point. I'm going to read 100 more pages. Let's talk about it, book club. Let's talk about it, Clue Crew. Then we'll have our guesses for who killed these people. All right, I got up to page 400. But then Eliot Crace was murdered, so I read one more chapter up to page 407. The final chapter we're going to cover in this video is entitled Cost in Books. There are so many clues, a lot of things I want to get to in this section, but I want to start off with what I consider the big bomb. For me, the big clue, the real eye-opener. Oh, is this what's going on in these 100 pages from 300 to 407? Eliot Crace has done this interview, trashing his grandma, calling her terrible, and people respond to it. And a Daily Mail columnist wrote this, and I think it opened up my eyes so much. The columnist tells the story that when she interviewed 70-year-old Miriam Crace, Miriam wanted to leave the interview, didn't want to be there, demanded 20 pounds before speaking with the interviewer. But then a week later, Miriam sent a charming note and a receipt for the St. Ambrose Children's Home, aka, oh, look, Miriam Crace isn't that bad. But of course, you read that and you suddenly go, wait a minute. That's somebody else. Miriam Crace was terrible in the interview, mean, wanted to leave, asking for money. And then somebody else pretended to be Miriam Crace and wrote this note saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, here, I'm giving to this children's home. Aren't I a good person? Someone is impersonating Miriam in that case. And so if somebody's impersonating Miriam in that case, the book has been pounding me in the head. How could somebody so mean and cruel as Miriam Crace write these wonderful, charming books about the little people. Well, why do we assume that Miriam Crace is actually the author of the Little People books? Isn't that what the book is saying to us? Isn't that what they're trying to get into our heads? Is that Miriam Crace is the name of the author of the Little People books, but probably didn't write them. Well, if she didn't write them, who would the author be? Logically, the only one that makes sense is her husband, Kenneth Rivers. People always thought Kenneth Rivers, her husband, was up in the attic working on taxidermy. Could he have been up there actually writing the Little People books? We hear he's into taxidermy, but there is this one case where he's actually buying something that's stuffed. He's not stuffing it himself. How do we know he stuffed any of these things? If we can't trust that Miriam Crace wrote the Little People books, how can we trust that Eliot Crace, her grandson, wrote this Atticus Pund continuation novel? It becomes real obvious early on that Eliot is terrible, and pretty much in this section I read, I was thinking to myself, somebody's going to kill Eliot Crace. And at the end, here we get to page 399, he gone, he's dead. But I got really hooked in the story, so I read ahead to page 407. Apologies, we're stopping there. Our final video will cover the final 200 pages of this book, and I'll make my final guesses. And let me say, right now, I have no clue. I do want to go over some actual clues, though, in this section, besides Miriam Crace may not have written the Little People's books. Okay, pages 300 to 407. What's the best thing about them? Elaine Clover, my top suspect, she's back in the story. Woohoo, there's got a chance. Now, it gets real ugly. Eliot Crace, he's having a problem. He's hitting his pregnant wife. What the hell? His wife, Jillian Crace, is based on Alice Carling. Alice is brutally murdered. Is he writing that the character his wife is based on gets murdered? What the hell, Eliot? I knew he was going to die. I was waiting for him to die. I was glad he died. Sorry, R.I.P. Eliot, or how about just rest, Eliot? R, nothing else, Eliot. Now, Jillian's pregnant, but Eliot's not the father. Ooh, the tea is being spilled. If Miriam Crace was killed because somebody wanted to keep the rights of the little people in the family, why was her grandson Eliot killed? He was killed because he said, ooh, I saw someone tiptoeing into grandmother's room before she died. Eliot says the person he saw tiptoeing into the room was at that party, the 20th anniversary remembrance celebration. So you have Jonathan and his wife Layla, Frederick Turner, adopted son Frederick Turner, grandson Roland, Elaine Clover, publisher Michael Flynn, and new character we have to put on the board, Julia Crace. Julia has changed her last name. She now goes by Julia Wilson. To me, that says she doesn't want to be really part of the Crace family. She wouldn't care about the little people rights. We meet Julia Crace / Wilson in this section, and Susan says, who is she based on? She's based on Judith Littleton. Okay, so we got this line here, and we're going to go all the way over here. So I mentioned that the little people, the characters, they adopted 2 children. And we know Frederick Turner was adopted, but we don't know of his second person who was adopted. Now, Jonathan Crace, it was his idea to have the littles adopt 2 people. Now, you look at this family, who would be the other adopted person other than Frederick Turner? Well, in Crazy Conspiracy Corner, what you need to know is that Jonathan Crace, Miriam's oldest son, is said to have red hair. While Roland, who is Jonathan's nephew, Roland has dark hair, while Eliot is said to have fair hair. Are these people related at all? Eliot Crace is dead. He was killed in what feels like a hit and run. Somebody seems to be trying to frame Susan. Who could have planted the car keys in Susan's coat pocket? Remember, she checked her coat at the 20th anniversary remembrance of Miriam Crace. So who could have got in there and planted the car keys in Susan's coat pocket? In the new section of the Atticus Pund novel, The Man with White Hair, as it's now called, we find out that there's this character, Harlan Scott, who has been chasing the Waysmiths because Beatrice the maid says that they've got paintings that the Nazis stole. It's really crazy, but that explains who was following Robert Waysmith way back when we first saw him leaving the gallery in the first section. Alice Carling was found dead. You would assume she might know about Lady Chalfont's will and any stipulations within it. Alice also was found with a picture of Harry Littleton with red lipstick on it. That really shocks Judith, and I thought, oh, is Judith in a relationship with Alice, not Harry? Let's go to Crazy Conspiracy Corner again on page 327. Pünd tells James, he says, you know what? Buildings like people can be scarred with the mark of Cain, and it will never leave them. Anytime I hear the mark of Cain, I always think, well, Cain killed his brother. Is that supposed to signify that a brother did it, either in real life or in the manuscript? Atticus also tells James that he thinks the big clue of this whole mystery is the shoe polish they found in the hotel room. What? I don't understand that at all. Do you understand it? Go down in the comments, let me know. Well, now it's time for my guesses. Okay, I'm 2/3 of the way through this book. I gotta make my grand accusations, who I think the killer is. I said it in the last video, I'm gonna say it in this one. I have no clue, no idea who the killer is. Do you? Go down in the comments, let me know. Remember, if you leave a comment, you could be eligible to win this copy of Anthony Horowitz's Marble Hall Murders. All right, let's start off with the one I'm really confused about, but maybe have some thoughts, and that is who killed the author Miriam Crace, the one that Eliot claims was killed. As I've already mentioned, my top suspect after 200 pages was Elaine Clover. And there's a part of me that thinks she's still my top suspect. I'm still not really sure why she's in this novel. And in these 100 pages, she does have an odd thing where she is at the remembrance, the 20-year anniversary of Miriam Crace's death, and the remembrance gathering for that. And Jonathan Crace is there at the party kind of coming towards her, and she dashes like she doesn't want to be seen by him. She's with Susan. What's going on there? She is still, admittedly, my number one suspect. I don't really have a motive for why she would do it, but here's how I would wrap my head around it. Why do I think Miriam Crace was killed? I think she was killed because she was going to sell away the rights to the Little People books. Miriam was old. She was going to die pretty soon, but they had to kill her then so she wouldn't give away the rights to the books. Who would have wanted those rights? Well, certainly Elaine Clover's husband, Charles Clover, would have wanted it. He was working with Miriam Crace on those last two books. He was about to open his own publishing firm. Wouldn't he want the Little Peoples to help launch his new firm? That's not really much of a reason for Elaine Clover to kill Miriam Crace, but there is something going on. We know there are the 3 anagrams, the 3 word scrambles. There's a part of me that is wondering about Eileen Marino. You're like, who's Eileen Marino? Go read the very first section of Pünd's last case and look for the name Eileen Marino. Could that be a hint towards Elaine Clover or what her maiden name was? But if I'm looking for somebody who has a motive to kill Miriam Crace, who wouldn't want her to give away the Little People book rights, who would that be? That'd be Eliot Crace's older brother, Roland. Now, why am I pointing out Roland? Well, just look at what happened. Miriam Crace is about to sell away the rights to the Little People, and she mysteriously dies. After her death, where do you think the rights go? They probably go to her husband, Kenneth Rivers. He dies, it feels like a year later, so the rights aren't with him anymore. Where do they go next? They go to maybe the oldest son, Jonathan Crace. He's the one interested in managing it. Now, if you kill Jonathan Crace, it would go to his daughter, Jasmine. So you can't kill him first. You got to get rid of Jasmine Crace. So then, if suddenly the rights are now in Jonathan Crace's hands, and suddenly he died, where would it go? It probably would go to grandson Roland next. Roland would get the benefit and the rights to the Little People. Roland was also seen as the protector by his younger sister and his younger brother, Eliot. Could Roland have been painting a bad picture of their grandmother so that nobody else would really want to be around the Little People but him? Again, this isn't really rocket science. I don't know what I'm doing, but those are my top 2 guesses in who killed Miriam Crace. I'm going to say number 1, it was Elaine Clover. Number 2, Roland Crace. Hopefully, I'm going to make some more guesses in the next video after I read up to page 500, but that's it. I'm going to have to make a real guess at page 500. Hopefully there'll be more clues to straighten this out for me. What do you think? I want to hear your guesses, even if you've read the book. Go down in the comments, tell me who your suspects were. Don't tell me if you were right or not, but tell me your suspects. For Lady Chalfont's death and Alice Carling's death in the manuscript about Pünd's last case, aka the man with white hair, boy, am I all over the place. In the first video, my really top suspect, only suspect, was cop Frederick Voltaire. There's still a lot to be suspicious about Voltaire about. I mean, so much to be suspicious about him. The one thing I can't figure out about Voltaire is what would the motive be? The killer, whoever killed Lady Chalfont, is trying to point the suspicion at Elmer Waysmith. Why would Frederick Voltaire want to do it? I don't have a good reason yet. And so, even though I think Frederick Voltaire has so much going on, maybe he's just a red herring and has all these things and we shouldn't look at him. Again, hopefully by page 500, I'll figure out a reason why Voltaire might have wanted to do all this. Voltaire, why would he kill Alice Carling? Well, I wonder if this is a misdirect, and I'm only doing this for Voltaire as a suspect. You know, the woman in the pharmacy, when the disguised man with the hat and the sunglasses was buying those pills, the woman in the pharmacy, you know, she didn't really look at him, and the person who was buying the pills was trying to turn away from her. Is it possible that Alice Carling was in the pharmacy not because she was trying to, you know, help and establish the time, but she was just there buying the pills? And so maybe she recognized Voltaire, and that's why she killed him. I don't know. It doesn't really work, but that's one guess. Again, if we look at who really benefits from Lady Chalfont dying and suspicion going to Elmer Waysmith, why, that would be somebody like Judith Littleton or her older brother, Geoffrey Chalfont. Now, either Judith or Geoffrey finds out about this will from Alice Carling. Alice Carling lets them know, hey, guess what? Elmer Waysmith is getting everything. Well, maybe, just maybe, you could contest the will if Elmer Waysmith is found guilty of murdering his wife, Lady Chalfont. And so really, I don't have many other clues. You know, maybe Geoffrey or, to be honest, Judith could have been having an affair with Alice. Alice thinks she's helping them buy pills. Geoffrey was there when his mother, Lady Chalfont, died. He sent Harry Littleton, you know, to go call the cops, and everybody's like, why call the cops? So, to be honest, Voltaire has a lot more suspicion, but kind of my fallback is somebody like Judith or Geoffrey who benefit, and that would be their motive. But I'm really confused. Really confused. Who did it? Guys, I'm going to have a final video out covering those last 200 pages. After I read up to page 500, I'm going to have my ultimate guesses. Please let me be right. This has been a fun thing. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that like button, subscribe. Tell me who you think did it. If you leave a comment on the YouTube page, everybody who left a comment, I'm going to put their name in a raffle to give away this signed copy of the book. Let's solve Marble Hall murders.